So, but here's the problem. The larger the carbon bubble swells, the more money the carbon people make. So, well, now this next section is called the perception war. So, the carbon industries aren't thinking long term. They're not thinking 20, 30 years from now. They're just trying to squeeze out as much money as they can because they have the research, they have the numbers in front of them, right? But here's the thing, what investors don't need like long-term thing, and most investors are looking for a quick turnaround. Not necessarily a couple days or a couple weeks, but like 6 months, 12, 18 months turnaround. So what the carbon industry needs is the perception of the inevitability of future profit, right? That's what keeps companies valued at a high rate. So, and this is why it's such, it's literally a perception war, because bubbles pop. I'll read this is the thing, and this is the thing I needed to understand, and this author says he needed his friends to explain it to him to understand. The carbon bubble will pop not when high carbon practices become impossible, but when their profits cease to be seen as reliable. And this is the main focus of the carbon industry. It's not about when oil runs out and there's no more oil to pump out of the ground, then the carbon industry will start losing money. It's when investors start going, oh, there's no future in this. We're going to be out of oil in 20 years or whatever, 30 years, so we need to get out today. That's their thing, right? If it becomes clear that this asset isn't going to be worth down the road, then they're going to keep pulling it out. So the value of oil will collapse way before the last barrel of oil is pulled out of the earth. It's when everyone thinks it's not worth anything, right? So now, a crisis of investor confidence is a real threat to the fossil fuel companies, not environmentalists, regulations, clean energy competitors, or climate agreements. So now, let's go back. What does this mean to the carbon lobby and the Trump gang? For hard carbon industries to continue to be attractive investments, then they must spin a tale of future growth. That's where Trump comes in, right? So how do you maintain these confidences? First of all, you dispute climate science. And that's these organizations that are fueled by ExxonMobil and the Koch brothers. They say the science is wishy-washy. They say, I've even heard this argument that it's just... Glenn Beck used to always say this, that it's those environmental, charities like the Sierra Club and the National Resource Defense Council with Leonardo DiCaprio, another Hollywood liberal. They're just making money for those charities. Okay, well, Leonardo DiCaprio does not need to do charity work to get his name out there. He could just make one movie. He's already plenty rich. He could never work another day of his life and make high 6 to 7 figures in residual checks every year. I know how show business works. He doesn't need this. And if you stack up all the money that is donated to all the environmental organizations, put it like here, right? It's about there. And then what the oil industry makes is like up here. The Koch brothers have made billions of dollars primarily from fossil fuels. All right, so you dispute the science. You attack global climate agreements, right? You make them look unstable and weak. Remember when the Bush administration, the United States was the only country that didn't go to the Kyoto meeting, the Kyoto Agreement on climate change. Every country in the world, they passed this in Kyoto, country in Kyoto, Japan. George Bush said, no, we're not going. Oil guy, right? You attack low-carbon competitors politically, attempting to portray the evidence that they can replace high-carbon industries as fraudulent, or at least overly idealistic. Remember Solandra, or whatever it was called? That solar company that Obama got behind, and then the media jumped in and said, oh, man, money was mishandled, and they made it this thing. So while you could debate some mismanagement happen, or maybe even some flat-out fraud happen with that specific deal. But the overall message, if you remember, that happened, I think, in 2009 or 10, maybe 11. The overall message from the corporate media was, see, solar, the green energies are you're corrupt. Stick with good old oil. You see every leverage point to slow low-carbon industrial progress. For example, by continuing massive subsidies to oil and gas companies, by attacking programs to develop new energy sources. Well, this is what happens in America all the time. If anyone out there who's watching in Europe, people always tell me, gas in America right now is between, depending on where you are, $2.30, $2.50 a gallon. Maybe it gets up to $3, but people in Europe are like, oh my God, it's $8, $9, $10 a gallon for us, because they don't have the big oil subsidies, because it doesn't have 300 million car-driving oil addicts. You support putting a price on carbon, since this makes you look moderate and engaged, but you make sure that the definition of reasonable price on carbon was low and took so long to implement that there was no real threat to your business. And then, of course, so this is when they replaced the dirtiest fuel. Like they said, we're not going to use coal anymore. It's too dirty. So we're going to use gas. That's like someone that's, way out of shape, and they get a big, cheeseburger, fries, and Coke, and an ice cream sundae, and then they go, wait a minute, make that a Diet Coke, and I'm cutting back calories. Yeah, you need to scrap the whole meal and get yourself a quinoa salad, which are delightful. You will ally with extremists and other sources of anti-democratic power in order to be able to fight democratic efforts to cut emissions through the application of threats, instability, and violence. Wow, that sounds familiar. I wonder if Putin ever has done anything like that. No. It was his right to take the Crimea region of the Ukraine. Then, most of all, you'd invest as heavily as possible in new infrastructure and supply. Standing Rock. They keep trying to build these pipelines. There's two reasons you do the pipelines. First, it sends a signal of confidence to markets that you expect to grow and continue in the future. Why would you build a giant pipeline from Canada all the way through the United States if you didn't think oil is going to be there for a long, long time, right? Second, it's politically harder to force companies to abandon expensive investments than it is to prevent those systems from being built in the first place. The mere existence of a pipeline becomes an argument for continuing to use it. This also bolsters investor confidence. Standing Rock. Obama didn't come into the very last minute. He said nothing about it. Which is, real quick, what can you do about that? Pull your money out of I have several accounts with Wells Fargo, and I realize they're funding the Dakota Access Pipeline. And I've currently been searching for either a credit union or a non-for-profit bank. I found this bank, Beneficial State Bank, which is owned by Tom Stair, and I'll do a whole other thing on all that, on the banking thing, but pull out some money. So, if you were going to put in place a presidential administration that was dedicated to taking these actions, it would look exactly like the Trump administration, right? And every single member of the lobby is, every single member of Trump's cabinet is a climate change denier, right? ExxonMobil chief Rex Tillerson, who is quoted as saying, the world is going to have to continue using fossil fuels whether they like it or not. He's going to be Secretary of State, right? So all of his appointees, man, are all Rick Perry, Secretary of Energy, and who's a big ally of big oil. Really? Texas guy, big oil? Scott Pruitt, he's going to be EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency Administrator, is a virulent climate denialist. Yeah, let's just get more Jerry Sandusky's running kids camps. Nikki Haley, UN ambassador, also known for suppressing climate science, as governor. Steve Bannon, chief strategist, and he's just beat his wife. A lot of wife beaters in this lineup of fine folks. Ryan Zinke, Secretary of the Interior, who supports more oil and gas exploration on public lands. Oh boy. Elaine Chao, Secretary of Transportation. working with her husband, Mitch McConnell, old nine chin Mitch. You remember Mitch, 2010, came out and said, I'm going to do everything in my power to block Obama. Yeah, fuck them. And on and on and on. So, why does this relate to Putin? Russia has two exports: weapons and oil. That's it. One of the reasons why China can put $111 billion in clean energy is because China has started, have taken a lot of hundreds of millions of people from a poverty level and put them into a middle class. Not middle class like American middle class is like wealthy in 75% of the world. But given these people a much better way of life in China, and China realizes too that, and I'm not some huge like, yay, China's so great, they've done some, they're not real great on human rights, and on and on. We could talk about China, but this is one advantage of having one central government. The president says we're going to do this, it just happens. There's not guys playing catch with a snowball in the Chinese cabinet. So Putin has no other economy. They didn't really embrace. Chairman Mao was the one who started to embrace capitalism. He saw what was happening in the Soviet Union and how they needed to start making stuff. When the Soviet Union collapsed, Russia is enjoying a lot of kind of freedoms and democracy, but they don't make China makes everything in the world. So this is why Putin desperately needs the United States to do this. All right. Russia is a petrostate. It's the #1 gas exporter and #2 oil exporter in the world. But otherwise, its economy has nothing. It's stagnant and out of date, as it says here. The oil and gas assets are controlled by a small number of oligarchs gathered around Putin, the former head of the KGB. Those oligarchs, KGB, cuddly good guys, good boys. Guys, whatever. Those oligarchs may be the one group of investors who stand to lose the most from the popping of the carbon bubble. Russia's major national asset is their potential to develop Arctic oil fields opened up by climate change. They're glad the polarized caps are melting because now there's some ground we can drill in that we couldn't before because it used to have 10 feet of ice over it. And if the whole world says we're not going to invest in oil anymore, then Russia can't spend money. There's no point in building oil drilling platforms on this newfound Arctic soil. But if the perception that the carbon bubble won't pop for decades, it's way down the road, 3, 4, or 5 decades down the road, then Putin stands to make a lot of money. Hundreds of millions of barrels of Arctic oil will pump his way. One estimate, these oil fields could be worth at least $500 billion. That's the kind of money you fix an election with, or for. So you add up all these tactics, right? So here's the thing, and Trump has flat out said, I'm not a believer in global warming. He said that numerous times. But here's the thing that's so frustrating. If you're frustrated with America and you think, what frustrates me the most, and why I've talked about in other videos, I don't like the two-party system, is they strangle us into this business. We should be using what we did in World War II, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, when FDR, first the Great Depression hit, and he rallied the country, put the whole country to work to get us out of the Depression. And then we were attacked by the Japanese, and he used World War II to get the whole country working. And then after we won World War II, America enjoyed such an amazing economy, and we became a world power. Then we weren't a world power before World War II, which is why this is so frustrating, because America should be using the severe threat of climate change, both economically and livelihoods as a battle cry to rally the whole country. He could put every American to work on this. Because I'll read this. It's not hyperbole to say that the swelling carbon bubble is not only not in the interest of the United States, it increases threats to our economy and national security, puts Americans at risk, undermines our prosperity, and weakens our nation. It's hard to call defending high carbon interests anything but unpatriotic. I could not agree more with that. And talking about national security, the Pentagon has been studying and has plans in place for if climate change destabilizes governments and how we're going to react from a national security standpoint. So it's something to think about. It's something for everybody to get involved with. It's another reason I'm going to push this so much. I'm getting involved more. The reason I started this channel is to get more involved. So pay attention to what's going on. Look behind stuff. Do research. Figure out what this is really about. Don't just watch the ticker. I mean, if you're going to watch CNN and MSNBC and Fox, that's great. But look for the scam behind what they're trying to get you to believe. Okay? Climate change is real, and it's the economic bubble that could burst. And there's a solution, and the solution could literally make America great. Make it fantastic. Make it the cleanest, and we could lead the charge. Right now, China is. Thanks for watching.